those are community members that are going to be representing all areas of our district, and they will give us some very valuable feedback. So all that works together, as you know, over the next 6 months until we finally come up with a project list. We are, at this point, planning on, looking at proposition, just like we have this previous bond. So, again, this work that you see up here illustrated by this picture, it has been going on. Our facilities department has been working throughout the summer. It actually started back in the spring on some potential projects. We have to start somewhere, and that's where we start with what they come up with. And so this is a potential project list. And again, this is I should probably have the word draft stamped all over this because this is a work in progress. And again, this is potential. I do want to point out right now we're looking at a $600 million capacity at our current tax rate. So that's kind of something I know that you frequently ask, what is it that we have to work with? And so, again, these are the projects, these are capital projects that primarily deal with our new campuses, with existing campuses, buses, land, safety and security, and so on. So I'm not going to go into detail on every single one of these. Certainly we'll take your questions at the end, but you can see that Proposition A will take up, at this point, a majority of our bonding capacity. Again, there are a few projects on there. Again, this is a work in progress that we're still some pricing on. Prop B, this is one of the props that did not pass last November. And so these are some of the athletic facilities. So again, these will be up for discussion amongst the board and the Comal board committee. And then Prop C, which were the stadium improvements that we had last time. And again, we really felt it was important to have these for discussion, again, because they did fail. And so I think we've had some informal discussions since the last bond, but I think it's important that the community, the board, all of us together talk about why it failed and how we go forward. So that's why we're including it in our initial discussion going forward, because we just need to have that discussion about what we do with all these different projects. And then finally, D, which is technology. This one did pass last November, and so we do have some additional projects. Not quite as much as last time, but this is what we're looking at. So this is our starting point. This is what we're going to be going with the Comal Board Committee, certainly with your guidance, board, and your direction. Certainly you're directing this project of putting this bond together. So with that, Mr. President, I will leave off there and be happy to answer any questions, take any feedback you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. We're no other questions on this one, aren't we? Mr. Garner?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Stanton, thank you for the presentation. Last time we did the bond, before we did come out forward, we did the facilities committee kind of did a whole kind of a 9-month, I guess, period of just looking through everything. And I mean, that was a very thorough review of everything. And so have you guys refreshed that, or you're just kind of, are we kind of leaning on the projects from last time that we still need? How are we doing with that?
Right now, we haven't brought that particular facilities committee that you mentioned. We have not brought that back because we do have so many projects that did not pass. That is obviously a starting point for us. Alex and his group have again been working, and really, I mean, building that facility for several years ago. I mean, they really kind of got the ball rolling, and so there's a lot of things that they identified that weren't even in last bond. So they gave us a good starting point, and certainly his group, they're out there on our campuses, finding those needs. Again, as I illustrated earlier, feedback into the campuses, because nobody knows the campus like the principal does, and so they're a valuable resource in helping direct those guys and figure out what projects need to be brought forward consideration on.
Okay, appreciate that. And I'll just say, I think the education piece is hugely important, and so certainly Come Out Forward is a big source of that, but I think it's, like I've said before, it's incumbent on all of us to get the word out and make everyone understand the needs, because these are all needs, these are not nice to have, these are things that we must have to continue to be a great district. So I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Krasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know I was a part of Come Out Forward this last go around, but are we considering looking at as Come Out County's come down with their taxes in recent weeks, our INS rate has also come into question. Is it any consideration for us to be able to not have the $600 million capacity and consider less INS tax rate as a part of the Come Out Forward discussions? Is that possible?
I'm a little bit hard to see it.
I don't think we ever want to put a bond package together solely based on capacity. So when we're building a bond package, it needs to be based on the needs of the district and what the district needs, and then we look at what that tax rate needs to be to support that growth and those needs. If we have less than the 600 million in capacity, then we use less, and we have that option to lower the tax rate. Or we have the option, as we exercise this year, to do a refunding or defeasance option in order to save in interest for the district and maintain that capacity to accommodate future growth. Because even if we don't build it into this bond package, we're still growing and we're still gonna need things down the line. And as you saw with at least some of those items listed in A, we're not looking at the cost of construction getting even cheaper. So I know as property values are going up, that's a pain point for a lot of people, but the cost of us being able to maintain and build the schools that we need in those areas of growth is also going up. So we need to just be cognizant of all the things that we're trying to balance.
And the only thing I'll say to that is specifically middle school number 9, that particular line item is a very tough pill to swallow for, I think, all of us up here.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how we're going from where we're at today on middle school 8 to middle school 9 being almost double. I'm sure there's some valid reasons there. And it's not that I don't have to have an explanation. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about bonding capacity and we're talking about actual projects in the future, that we're being realistic.
Absolutely. I think currently, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at 1% a month or 1.3% a month of escalation is what those numbers were. And that was coming from our estimators to tell us like what they've been seeing over the last 12 months. Now, I agree with you. I think that is that gonna continue with the economy and with interest rates going up and things maybe leveling out? I don't know. But I also don't want to be in a spot where I'm 20 million in the hole on projects. So I think there's a lot of discussion to have on what the right things are between now and February when we have to call.
Sorry, is that going off of middle school 8's kind of architecture and plans?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. Mrs. Biasotti.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Shepard, you and I spoke briefly about Come Out Forward, and I've been talking to some people in my area and have some names for you, but you had mentioned thinking it would be a good idea to have some people that were just recently on Come Out Forward maybe come to that first meeting, because there's so many new faces, and can you just share that with the board? I think it's a fabulous idea.
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that we've thought about is either the first or second meeting, depending on how our schedule is when you come into one of these meetings, you really don't know what to expect. And, you've been asked to serve, and, people are eager to serve, but it's like, really, what am I going to be doing? What can I expect? And so we have quite a few veterans who've been part of the 2015, 2017, 2021 bonds, come out forwards. And so what we'd like to do is kind of put a panel of some of our veteran Come Out Forward members up there to just kind of talk about the process, what they can expect, what you'll learn, what you'll hear, what kind of questions do you need to ask, what do you need to be thoughtful of, and what does it take, what's your, what role do you play after the bond is called and get out there and help educate our community. So that's kind of part of the process that we want to have this time to help. Again, since we have so many new people on this committee, hopefully not on the committee, hopefully they'll all say yes, but since they're going to be coming into this kind of square one, that little panel would help get them doing the right direction.
Yes, and the people that I've spoken to really like that idea because I think they like to hear from their peers rather than from me, trying to convince them of, to join. And they'll be able to answer all the questions that we're not thinking of. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piazotti. Mrs. Ross?
Thank you, Mr. President. Board, when we're talking about the bond and we get into further conversations going forward, I feel like it's gonna be really interesting to see what the Comal Forward has to say about all the different propositions and what failed and why it failed and what our community has said about the last bond and what they are willing to support now. We've gotta be really careful with that because we cannot go into another failure. And I also want us to keep in mind that we have a new superintendent coming. And so that superintendent is gonna be new to the role trying to sell a bond. And if we go to a $600 million bond, it's gonna be a tough sell as they get to know the community or they, or they're new to the role. So I just want us to keep that in mind when we're talking about what that is. And I also want to say that I would love for you to go back and look at those numbers because it is a hard pill to swallow. And I think that on those elementary and middle school, I almost feel like if we put that number out, those numbers out there, that we're gonna get laughed out of the community because that's a really high number for those schools. So that's a lot of communication and selling we have to do with that. So those are just some things that I think that we need to keep in mind as we go further into this.
Thank you, Mrs. Ross. Mr. Henson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Question for you, Mr. Stanford. Our next board meeting is after the first Comal Forward meeting. I do remember the first meeting is really about an introduction and kind of laying the groundwork and gathering information for those attendees of Comal Forward. At what point do you want from the board a more finite direction or discussion to happen? Where do you see that fitting into this schedule of meetings?
It may not be in that, because that first meeting's gonna be really us educating them and getting them up to speed. It may not be at that meeting, but I would suspect that probably starting October, we're gonna have had some meetings, a couple meetings with them. And really, if you recall back when we did come out forward last time, it was really like, we gave an update to you of what we presented to them, right? So you heard what they heard. I shared with you the feedback, like, so as we presented to them, they were, let's maybe talk about the prices of the new schools. I can then report back to you, like, they were like okay with it, or they were like really squeamish about it, right? I can give you some temperature of how the board group is feeling about that. And then you in turn will provide me your feedback, and then the next meeting after that, I go, well, I presented to the board, and here's where they're going. And so really the whole process is a back and forth. It runs about 2 meetings with them, and then a meeting with you, and another 2 meetings with them, and then a meeting with you. So it really gives us an opportunity for me to I'm kind of the middleman, right? I'm sharing what they are talking about with you, and then vice versa. And so I think again, going through this will be the 4th bond, right, that we've had in the last 10 years. As we get closer, the discussion gets down to a point, right? Until we really start getting into some really details about, do we do this project or not do that project? Do we do a prop, whatever, or not do a prop? So I think you'll see it, as you just kind of move in that direction. I don't know that, and I think as I've shared stuff with Comal Forward, you'll start getting a feeling of kind of how things are going. And I do want to say that, we want to rely on the board as providing that ultimate direction. It's not the other way around. The committee doesn't tell you the direction, the board tells us the direction.
Well, if I may too, I'll interject some here, Mr. Hennessy. with what, like Ms. Ross just alluded to, their Comal Forward's first meeting is September 12th, and then October 3rd, October 17th. Really depending on how this evening goes in executive session with conversation about, moving forward with new superintendent, how that looks. It's possible we could get into the fourth Comal Forward meeting with barely, if then even having a named, superintendent. So it's gonna be time crunch for sure for, even if it's our acting superintendent or anybody else that's applied, it's gonna be a time crunch coming into the winter months and everything. So, you know, I do feel that the more group work that Comal Forward, Mr. Stanford, his group's able to do prior to is gonna be very critical this time.
Agreed, and that was part of the reason for the questioning as well. And, you know, Mr. Ross made a valid point that, you know, we do rely on Comal Forward to give us a little bit of feedback. I mean, we're all out in our own communities and we know what our constituents share with us, but that Comal Forward is a valuable resource for us, and I do appreciate them being willing to work with us.
Thank you, that's all. Thank you. All right, Mr. Henry, thank you, Mr. Hennessy. Mr. Garner, you had another follow-up?
Yeah, this was great, thank you. So I'm glad Mr. Krasinski brought up the INS tax rate, because I think that's gonna be an important part when you do the school finance 101. I think it's important to highlight, you know, that this district has remained consistent with that rate since 2015. However, probably the new variable is certainly the inflation and obviously the interest rates going up. So I think it's important to get feedback from that committee on going forward, you know, philosophy with that, or do we, you know, are we just gonna, whether maintaining consistency is more important, or whether we can go just to the level required to pay off debt each year. So, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garner. Mrs. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Stanford or Ms. Hermish, she's not here. Oh, there you are. Okay. So you moved over. I was looking at these numbers. Obviously, we all had a reaction to, you know, just kind of going on line item by line item. I was crunching the math, and it looks, if you go to almost any of them, the TBDs for the estimated costs. Now, the total Prop A, or if you want to go to Prop A, that is the total cost of just what we have gotten an estimated cost. How are you going to factor in the other costs of the ones that are TBD?
So the ones that are TBD are really just that we haven't had the chance to really get into what a good campus refresh number might be. So we just got a roof assessment back, so we're looking at our roofing projects and which ones may need to be in the next bond, along with HVAC and those kinds of projects, just looking ahead. So those tend to be, we're analyzing the work orders, we're analyzing all those things to come up with what needs to go in there. And so we're still in the process of looking at that. And then the DHS expansion is one that we just, like, it's just coming to us with the growth at Davenport, that may be something we at least want to put something on to have an idea and to see what the right timing is for that as well. And then with the new incoming director of safety and security, like, we're gonna need to work with that person when they onboard with what projects that they may see future-wise that we need in that section. But as far as how we add that in, it's always a little bit of a prioritizing, massaging, and we may need a facility committee meeting of 1 or 2, or we may be able to flush it out just and come out forward. So once we get those project lists back in, we'll be able to move forward with those pieces.
Okay, so just to summarize, with you put it on paper just so you can go back and look and then can go and find.
Correct. We don't want to take them off because these are things that you're used to seeing in a full bond package, and that way we don't have a good dollar figure to dump in there quite yet.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. Okay, I've got a couple things too. I know that Mr. Krasinski and Mr. Garner brought up the INS side. I too have talked with Mrs. Harmish about that, and I know that we've asked Mr. Westerman to potentially come to the September or the latest, the October board meeting to really give us a total synopsis of what bonding capacity would do. Looking at the INS side, you know, from 35 to 30 to 25, whatever it can be, just to be mindful of that. So I know we'll be updated on that rather soon in the.
September, because we have to adopt the tax rate officially in September, so the tax statements can go out in October, so.
Okay.
for the next month.
And, thank you. And one of the things that I'm really gonna just address the board with here is, and it's not gonna be popular, I will tell you that right now, but it's conversation that needs to be had, whether it's really with the, with Comal Ford, or whoever it's with, but we need to start conversations with these developers. Developer conversations. You have developers that are developing 700 homes that do not care one thing about our school capacities. But they care everything about putting on their signs, Comal ISD, A-rated district. They're the ones getting fat. We as taxpayers are the ones paying for this. We need to re-engage with our developers. I think the last developer who, I'll call it donated land, is not even a developer anymore. It was blue-green, and it was land for Rebecca Creek Elementary School. But I think we need to start talking about land availability with developers, and if that means we need to have a position in-house with our construction department about, on the real estate side of the liaison, to approach developers early on and talk about available land, because we're paying a premium cost for land, because they're buying it. Then you have cost sharing potential. There are other districts throughout, not really Texas of late, but Texas years ago, that would do a cost share with a developer in forms of either donated land or an in-kind donation back to a school district. Again, it hasn't happened for decades probably, but we need to do that. We need to be the ones to be engaging and going back out. Even with the municipalities that are approving all these permits, they know with our demographer very early on who's looking at what. And I think we can do a better job. And I'm not saying us 7 need to do a better job. We need to be putting our boots on and walking land. I'm not saying that. Although, if we want to, yeah, I mean, hey, why not? But I really am saying that we have got to engage, and I will be at the September 12th Comal Forward meeting, just to do like a welcome and stuff, and just kind of what do we call it? How the task Comal Forward. And I am going to bring this up, and I'm going to bring that up to the people that sit on Comal Forward, because there are movers and shakers across our 589 square miles that can help us engage and get in front of the right people, and they definitely want to. Because I guarantee no taxpayer out there right now is encouraged by another $600 million bond and paying more in taxes, when again, the person that's really getting fat on all this, again, are the developers. So we have two options, that, or we can go ahead and just, well, we actually have 3 options. We can engage developers and try to pressure and let them know our capacities. We can't take more kids. I mean, you've got 700 single-family rentals coming up right now outside of Johnson Ranch. Where are we gonna put those kids? And they're rentals, which means they're high yield. So when Mr. Templeton gets here in September, these are gonna be conversations, again, that we have to bring up. And again, they're not gonna be popular with the powers to be out there on the developing side, but it's time, we have to go there. When I talk about the municipalities approving these permits and stuff, and they know there is a trigger mechanism for them, they can also engage with the developers and say, you understand that this is the school zone for NBISD or CISD or whatever ISD, and this is the school that it is 90% at capacity right now. The third option is we just tell our teachers to stop doing what they're doing. We don't care about an A+ rating throughout our district. We don't care about, the great job that they're doing in the educating of these kids. It's like we said at Convocation, we are Destination Texas because of the job that these folks in this room do, and it's our teachers. And that's attracting these people, and it's attracting, again, the developers. So we have to go right back to option 1, in my opinion. And again, that's really just conversation to have, but moving forward, we have to start engaging them folks again. So, other than that, I think we're all good up here, so appreciate the presentation. Yeah, and Mrs. Jones, we're right now with these, we're at 610 million. And some of the TBDs that were looked at with the failure of props, what failed last time, B and D, C and D. I mean, you can add another 40-ish million to that. We could be at 650 million in a nanosecond. And the land proposition, that is TBD, that's up to the appetite of the board. and trying to really, again, not with Comal forward immediately, but us forward thinking about where our needs are gonna be, so. Anyway, should be some fun times over the next, 90, 120, 150, 180 days, so, thank you, Mr. Stanford. All right, next on the agenda is school naming, again, Mr. Stanford.
Yes, sir. So, came to you last month, we just kind of gave you a preview of what we're gonna be working on as far as the naming of our 3 new schools. Got an update on that from Ms. Hermish earlier on number 19, number 20, and middle school 8. Just real quick, so our timeline, we had our first committee meeting last Monday. We're here tonight to give you an update. We're gonna have another committee meeting this, week, and then a third one, if needed, on the 29th. We're planning on coming to you on the 19th of September, to present some name recommendations for your approval. Once we get your approval on the name, we're gonna start the mascot. It's always easier to know what the name is before you try the mascot, because you kind of wanna have that, perhaps a chance of liberation or whatever. So we're gonna do that, and then we'll come to you in October and have that mascot approval by the board of trustees. So, as I said, we started last week with our committee, and I shared some of these same slides with them. Again, it's not a huge committee, it's a representatives from about 5 to 7 representatives from each of the 3 campuses. And one thing that I stressed to the committee at the very beginning is not their job to name the schools. That is not their task. Per board policy, that falls to the board of trustees. Board of trustees is ultimately responsible for naming any and all of our facilities. Their role is just simply to help us narrow down the suggestions that the nominations, the nominations we receive from the community, to help narrow those down so that we can bring them to you and kind of help, rather than you trying to go through a list of 20 names and figure out which one works, you got a little bit of feedback from the community. I will go over every specific line item of this board policy. I provided it in your memo, but again, it outlines who we can name a school after. And then, right now, we're in that position where they're gonna review the name submission. They do have the opportunity to provide names if none of them meet the criteria. And then they're gonna come to you, I'll come to you with 2, no more than 3 names, and provide that rationale. Again, it is a board decision. So, let me share with you, some of the nominations that we received. I'm just going to be, quite frank, when we did this, we actually went for a second, round of nominations and, see if we had anything, different. And so, and I provide again the memo. I won't go through and read all of these, all the history behind all these, but basically Canyon Bluff was, just connecting with kind of Canyons, Kansas Elementary 19 down off 46. Gateway Elementary was actually related to Bill Gates. Trump Elementary president. Lindenheimer, he was a very prominent figure in the early establishment of New Braunfels. And then I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name. You know how I am today. But anyway, that is the 11-leaf grant that, the land that we bought that came where we bought the school. That's how that is connected. So again, that's what we received for elementary 19. Elementary 20, this again is the one right across from Danville. Putnam, that is a San Marcos police officer. Not much connection to our district, but somebody trying to honor a fallen law enforcement officer. We have Wenzel. They established some farms in the area. Danville, that's kind of obvious. It would just be following the middle school name. Prince Psalms or Psalms Elementary, that area was, of course, instrumental in the founding of New Braunfels. The Psalms area would be served by this campus. Comal Creek, dry Comal Creek runs nearby. We did have Comal Elementary, which is not far from there, and there has been talk about who we revive that name when we built Garden Ridge, about bringing that into play. person who submitted that, we quite honestly did not provide any history. Chris Kyle, of course, you know, he was, American Sniper, you know about. And then Harlan Block, he was at the, second flag raising of, Iwo Jima, and he's from Yorktown, Texas. So that's what we got for elementary 20. And then middle school 8, Erastus F. Smith was Sam Houston's chief scout and was instrumental in the Texas's win over San Jacinto. We have Indian Springs, of course you have Indian Springs Elementary. Nathan Macias, he resides in Laverne. He has served in the Air Force for 2 decades as a retired decorated veteran. He also was the only Hispanic Republican to serve in the 80th legislature. We have, of course, our 45th president. We also have another president, former president, at Johnson Ranch Middle School, Old Verde Middle School, Honeys Creek, and then Poplar Grove, which was kind of a combination of the names from the two neighborhoods that are in that area. Now, one thing in our board policy is that when we receive names from previous nominations, that we keep those, and those can be considered by the board going forward. And so what I did, now we have received quite a bit. I do have to point out, perhaps in every school name that I've done, there's been one name that has been consistent, and that is George Strait. Everybody knows George Strait. And I'm like, if you can't get into a concert, we'll name it George Strait. So I was just,
If we can go with George Strait, I think the Troubadours would be the mascot. Done. You want to take action?
But anyway, so I went back to our previous nominations, and again, if I were to go back all the way to middle school, Danville, and Piper Ranch, we'd have a really long list, and some of them, those committees really scratch off a lot of the names. But here are some names that those previous committees considered. These were high ranking, but they didn't make the cut. And so I brought these back to these committees, and these are eligible not for any one specific school, but for any of the 3 schools. Okay. Major General Patrick Brady, he resides here in our district. He is most decorated living veteran. He's a Medal of Honor recipient, has an amazing story. I included his bio in your board book, but his name has come up several times throughout our meetings. John Bullis, again, former military. He was a 2nd lieutenant in the 41st Colored Infantry back in 1869, and so he had a very decorated, ended up as a brigadier general by President Roosevelt from Texas. We have John Farias, who is a fallen Marine, who is a graduate of our district, Canyon High School. William Sevier, he was a former superintendent back in the day. Thomas Spitzer, another fallen Marine, who was a graduate of Canyon High School. Robert Taves, I remember he was one of the early nominations, I think the first nomination I ever received from his daughter at Houston. He served as a teacher, counselor, and principal for many years in the early days of our district. Also served in the military as well. And then Randy Vetter, he grew up in New Braunfels off of Shanefall Road, and he graduated from Canyon High School, and he was killed in line of duty. He was a DPS officer. So I presented those names to the committee as well. And as part of our process, the homework that we left them with at our in-bar session on Monday, I built out a matrix, and I put all the names in it, and I won't go through the details, but I have it basically as a scoring system. And what that does, it allows each of the committee members individually to read through the history, to read through the bios, and then kind of rank out and score, maximum 50 points, and there's some different criteria. And basically when everybody does their matrix, they give it back to us, and we kind of add up all the points. And it kind of gives us a place where we kind of see what are the names that are rising to the top. We're going to take those what we've got from the matrix, we're gonna have at our second meeting, we're gonna talk about. Certainly want to give the committee some opportunity to discuss it. See if there's any other feedback, anything else that they want to suggest. Sometimes usually in the second meeting, somebody will have done some homework, done some research, provide maybe another name that hasn't been provided. So we'll certainly have that discussion, but I did want to share with you tonight where the committee is going. Now, before I pull this up, I want to say this is not the recommendation. This is simply where is the committee at this hour. So this is the first pass for elementary 19. Names that rose to the top were John Carey's, Major General Henry Brady, and then Thomas Spitzer. Elementary 20, pretty much the same, except Randall Vetter instead of Thomas Spitzer. And then middle school 8, you can see we have General Brady on every one of these, Bulverde Middle School, and then General John Bullis. So that's where we sit right now, board. Again, we'll have further discussion later this week and get more feedback from the community on, again, these are we just looked at the top 3, there's certainly 4 and 5, but just our discussions 9 and 20 kind of show you what the top 3 contenders are for each of our campuses. So with that, Mr. President, I will turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. Mrs. Biasotti?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Stanford, for this presentation. 2 questions. One, can the board, do we have to nominate through the committee if we have a name?
No, you do not.
Okay, we just have to provide you with one.
Well, and whether it's on the document, the dice, the board says, hey, I would like to,
Okay.
the board consider X, Y name.
Okay. And then, like, let's look at this, the first pass, say, the Major General Patrick Henry Brady. That would not be the name of the school, correct? Like, could it be Brady Elementary?
Sure, certainly.
Or this is just-
When we get to the official name, we can say it's, Brady Elementary.
Okay.
And then, of course, there'll be a plaque or something inside the building that would go into a history of, who the namesake is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Biasotti. Mr. Hennessy?
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Stanford. I appreciate all this information, very interesting to read through, and obviously the committee is putting some thought behind this, which I truly do appreciate. I'm not going to speak as to what I like on regards to the name of the school, but I'm going to get ahead in front of you regarding the mascot and say, just potentially I'd like to reserve the potatoes, which I think was one that was submitted the last time we named the school, so we'll see how that goes.
Good.
That is a joke. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Look forward to seeing what the committee comes back with, and then we will get updated again at the board meeting in September.
September 19th. So September 19th would be an action item where you would,
Potentially can take action. Okay. Yeah, okay, sounds good. Thanks, Mr. Stanford. Okay, next is Maximizing Academic Performance 2022 Accountability Update. This is Courtney Withrow.
Good evening, Mr. President, board members, and Ms. Epley. Tonight, administration is providing an update on the 2022 state accountability ratings assigned by the Texas Education Agency last week. Districts and campuses are evaluated in 3 areas: student achievement, school progress, and closing the gaps. Comal ISD earned an A with a score of 93, and that is up from a 92 in 2019. We did not have any accountability ratings as a reminder in 2020 or 2021, so 92 in 2019 would be the last time we did that. 100% of Comal ISD campuses received a passing grade. 23 earned an A, 9 earned a B, and 1 earned a C. Incidentally, in 2019, we had 16 A's, 12 B's, and 2 C's. 26 campuses received at least 1 Campuses are eligible for distinctions in ELA reading, math, science, social studies for secondary campuses only, academic growth, post-secondary readiness, and closing the gaps. In your board packet, administration did include a breakdown of distinctions earned by each campus. 4 CISD campuses earned all eligible distinction designations. Those are Arlington Elementary, Mountain Valley Elementary, Ronald Verde Elementary, and Mountain Valley Middle School. While we were together at the leadership lunch in July, TEA communicated an error in the grading of the 5th grade math star assessment. One question was marked as a wrong answer when some students actually chose correctly. 1,309 of our 5th graders answered this particular question correctly and were given the extra point. For this group though, it did not change their overall performance level. However, for 193 students, one question made a difference in their overall performance level. Grade 18 students moved from did not meet to approaches because of this error, the correction of the error actually. We had 52 students move from approaches to meets, and we had 123 students move from meets to masters. These scores were adjusted accordingly prior to the release of the 2022 accountability ratings. For the past several years, staff has monitored and compared performance between Comal ISD and several districts across the state. We are one of 396 districts that earned an A, which accounts for about 1/3 of the state. Comal ISD has improved its position among those who we compare ourselves to, landing us in the top 5 of the group for our overall rating. When we look at each domain, student achievement, school progress, and closing gaps, Comal ISD performed well in all 3 areas as compared to while we celebrate the accomplishments, hard work, and dedication of our students and staff, there is still work to be done. Campus accountability workshops are underway, where the accountability research team leads a deep dive into the data behind each campus rating. Progress monitoring will be facilitated throughout the year with campus visits, checkpoints, and DILT meetings. Final decisions on 2023 accountability are not available at this time, as TEA is going through a reset process. However, administration will be updating campus leaders as pending changes are released. I thank you all, and I'll turn it over to Mr. President for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Woodrow. And we'll start to the right with Ms. Pisa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to talk before Michelle started crying.
That is amazing.
True. This is really awesome. I've said this for the last couple of years. I think as a parent, you have no idea when you're on the outside, and most parents are on the outside. I'm lucky enough to not be on the outside, and I can see all the hard work that you guys do. But regardless of where parents are, in or out, this is amazing, and everyone should be so proud. I do not take lightly what this means, and the work that everybody out here and all the teams do is just phenomenal. And the improvement from 19, those couple points, those are huge. It doesn't maybe look like that from an outsider, but we know what it takes to even bump up or down. And it's just amazing. And I'm very proud to be a parent of 3 students, but also very proud to be up here to be able to watch how it all unravels. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Piasotti. Mr. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I appreciate the presentation. I know there's a lot of work put into this. This part is the easy part, right? Get to give us good news. That's awesome. I do feel like with the past 3 years of COVID and everything, it feels more like a 5-point raise than a 1-point, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of districts went the other way, and I know be a lot of positive things said, but I think I just want to highlight that summer of 2020, there was a lot of tough decisions that had to be made. And I really appreciated the steadfast leadership of Mr. Kim that summer. As a new trustee, we were 100% on board that we needed to get kids back in school. And that's what we did. And so this is, this shows the decision-making there that was the right thing to do. So I would be remiss not to highlight Mr. Kim's leadership during that period of time that's got us to kind of where we are today. And I'll just say that I'm very excited for the future to see where we can go in the upcoming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garner. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to every person that played a part in Comal ISD success. Whether you're in a classroom, whether you're sitting here today, whether you are working behind the scenes, to every single person that played a part in this, I just want to say thank you, because I am a proud Comal graduate and I am a proud Comal mom. And tomorrow I will have officially 3 kids as well, just like Courtney, that are coming here, and to watch my kids get raised in such a district that puts in the work, that puts in the time, and quite frankly puts in the heart. It does not go unnoticed by any means, and I just want to take the opportunity, and I hope you celebrate these numbers. To go for distinctions earned from 2019, from 60 to 2022, 97. That is huge. 2018 to 2019 was 3. So just thank you to every single person. My hat's off to you for this results. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Krasinski?
I don't have a lot to follow up with what was said, but I'll just echo and say that I'm proud to be a part of this district. I too graduated from Comal ISD, and I've got 2 kids that are currently going through it. So, thank you to everybody. Thank you all for putting in the hard work. I know it's the hours are kind of unseen by everybody. The after hours here today, plus all the ones we don't see, that we're not a part of. Teachers included, who are putting in effort at home, and it's just not something that is top of mind or surface very often. But thank y'all for everything y'all do. This is a testament to the hard work. I don't have much.
Thank you, Mr. Krasinski. Mr. Hennessy?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to start off with an apology, because at the last presentation of this data that was incorrect from TEA, I did praise, and we saw there were issues. Well, the real issue turns out to be that one question, because I was leaning heavily on what's going on with our math. Why is our math not following everything else? So that's the answer to that. I'd like to point out more how important that question was. That moved one of our elementary campuses that was given a rating of a C. They are now an A. That one question changed their accountability rating. That's how powerful that is. And the campus that happened to, that is no small feat. And so I applaud those teachers that were able to pull those students, get them across the line like that. As you remember, Ward, we were at convocations, and Mrs. Epley, prior to the convocation, shared with us, we were privy to the information that TEA, there was a mistake in the grading of these tests. So we knew going into convocation what the true grades were. And as you all remember, when we shared that with the audience, the packed auditorium full of teachers, they went nuts. And that's a big deal. And so apology for that, but at the time, that was the appropriate thing to be said, but it's quite obvious that we are a phenomenal district. And thank you.
Thank you, Hennessy. Mrs. Ross, did you have anything to say?
Yes. So, Mr. Hennessy just said a lot of what I wanted to say. Was an apology first, because I know it was pretty tough on you guys on the math. I knew there was a problem. It just didn't happen to be us. So that's a good thing. I still know there's some work to do there, but I know we're gonna get even better than we are. And Mr. Hennessy, when he talked about oh gosh. When he talks about the celebrations and the phone calls and hearing all the teachers when they first heard their scores and the screaming and the yelling and the celebration, it was a moment. It was a very good moment. And I've been to a lot of the checkpoints and the day-to-days and all of that, and a lot of people don't know. In fact, I had it said to me once that Comal doesn't know how to do data, that we slack on data, and I was like, I'm gonna sit here and argue with you right now. Because it's not true, because we really do pay attention to what we do and help our teachers get there, let them learn how to dig into that, and that's a very touching moment. And it just proves that remaining steady through the pandemic and then taking us to this next level, it just shows that we're just gonna go upwards from here. And good job.
Awesome, thank you, Mrs. Ross. I too just want to say thank you very much. Again, as a parent, first and foremost, when they come to ISD, like I said, convocation wasn't born and raised in this area, but definitely my first two daughters, we got here as quickly as we could because of the quality of education at that time. And little did we know we even had a lot of work to do back when I moved to the district in 2004. And I would echo exactly the same thing that the other 6 trustees have already said up here, so I won't go there, but I will allude to a little bit deeper on the fact of Comal Independent School District does not just teach to test. You look at the gaps that were closed in the years through COVID and the pandemic there. Comal ISD and these teachers and these staff leaders teach to the kids. So when Ms. Epley at Convocations put up there the 28,000, whatever that number was at that time, it's grown since then before school starts tomorrow. They're not, or 29,100, whatever that was. It's not just a number, it's a kid. And it's a kid to everybody in this district. It's a kid to Mr. Smith who come up here and talk about construction, and it's a kid to the janitors that stay late at night to clean these schools. And I don't think that gets said enough. It doesn't get printed enough. This information right here is front page news. This is to talk about the level of expectation that was placed on superintendent through a pandemic, and it was placed from the superintendent onto every individual teacher and staff member throughout this district. Y'all met the expectations. In fact, truly, you did better. All we were really worried as a board. We were hoping we'd just flatline. Just please don't dip, don't dip, don't dip. And we focused on some other school districts within our region, and we beat them. Y'all beat every single one of them. And for that, for anybody to criticize, condemn, or really not support this district of excellence that prepares every young man, every young woman for whatever it is in their next step in life when they graduate that class, college, career, military ready, that starts on day one. And for that, Ms. Goodall, and everybody that's in this audience, that's appreciated. That's just, you're cream of the crop. Like I said at Convocation too, you're the rock stars. So thank you very much. You know, now we just got to keep climbing to try to catch Hyde Park. But again, thank you all very much. The work is definitely noticed, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. All right, we'll jump over to consent agenda. Page 43 begins, and page 111, 12, somewhere in there. Mr. Krasinski.
We pull D and F, please.
Repeat that, D and F. D and F. Yeah, go ahead. D and F removes.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hennessy.
I move to approve the consent agenda items except for items D and F as presented.
Motion made, motion second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. D is budget amendments. Mrs. Hermish. 75. Mr. Krasinski.
I've just got a couple of questions about this. So, Are these carryovers from 2021 and 2022 line items? And if so, what is that, how is that money been allocated back into the 2021-2022 budget?
Well, that's actually what you're doing by approving the budget amendment. So these are purchase orders that were not fulfilled by the end of last year, June 30th. So these items, yes, were approved with last year's budget. We didn't spend it in last year. So those funds will flow into our fund balance for 21-22. And so we're asking basically to use that fund balance, those same funds, to allocate for those same purchases for 22-23 because they'll come in after July 1.
Okay, so it's a net increase, but also it's an
Correct.
increase to our
It's a-
current budget, but we have the funds to pay it from previous year.
Correct.
All right. That's all I got, D.
Mrs. Johnny, do you want to, page 87 is the adjunct faculty for Texas Agri-Life Extension, that is F, correct? It's both of them. Oh, Mrs. Renee Martinez. Thank you, Mrs. Herman. Page 87. 88 is,
So my question is this gonna, obviously, reading through this, it looks like we're gonna have to count children, kids, young adults, absent, present when they are with a 4-H, they're participating in 4-H, let's just call it that.
Correct. It actually covers our students participating in 4-H and junior FFA at the middle school and elementary level. So our high school ag teachers help facilitate those lists and getting them to our elementary and middle school campuses so that they're counted as an excused absence and not an absence that's not excused.
And there's nothing that getting into an agreement with 4-H or Agri-Life Extension, there's not gonna be any costs associated to the district for that.
No cost at all. We've been doing this, I know at least for the last 19 years since I've been here, probably before that, so. We did add Bear County this year. We've always had Comal and Guadalupe. I've reached out the last 2 years to Bear County with no response from them. And then this year at the last minute, they reached out, Mr. Stanford came and found me and said, Renee, I said, yay, we finally put Bear County on board, so.
That was on my question.
very good, thank you so much. All right. I think the language on 75 to 87, right?
Will you do individually?
You can do individual, you can do both of them. You can pull both of them.
I move to approve D and F, the consent agenda's items as presented.
Motion made, second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will go into action item. First will be consideration of possible action on resolution convening the SHAC Community Human Sexuality Instruction. Mrs. McKaylee Smith with an assist here, it looks like, by Ms. Eddie.
Good evening, Mr. President, Board of Trustees, and staff lead. Last month, I presented for board discussion an update on new state legislation requiring public schools to formally pass the required resolution to convene the School Health Advisory Council for the purpose of recommending curriculum materials for instruction on topics pertaining to Senate Bill 9 and House Bill 1525. Administration requested that each member of the board appoint one non-employee constituent to serve on the district's SHAC for future review of curriculum materials pertaining to SB 9 and HB 1525 topics. And thank you for doing so. Tonight, administration requests the board adopt a resolution to convene the SHAC for the purpose of making a recommendation regarding an update of our current community supporting curriculum materials.
Happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hennessy.
I move to approve administration's recommendation to adopt a resolution to convene the SHAC for the purpose of reviewing curriculum materials pertaining to Senate Bill 9 and House Bill 1525.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Smith, and thank you for doing this too. All right, next is consideration and possible approval of middle school 8, BP3 GMP, and it looks like Mrs. Hermish is taking over the presentation.
Well, Alex is at the ready for a big assist, so don't worry. But we're bringing to you, bid package 3, and I know earlier this evening, we talked a little bit about middle school 8 and where we were in the procurement side of it. Scansca has worked with Blue Architects to put together this bid package 3. The original projected budget for this one was close to $18 million, and they came in around $20 million. In the extras, there were some additional information about where those additional costs are coming from. And one thing I wanted to point out is that we do get, as our engineers on the geotechnical side are working through the project, there were some additions to piers, foundations, as well as some additional items for wide road and building sidewalk and some things like that, that they came across after the project was originally provided to Scansca. So most of the increases are due to additional addages to the project, as well as around $500,000 in additional allowances related to anything else that we may find along the way. But with that, so we are presenting this to you for approval tonight in the amount of $20,094,134. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Hermish. Mrs. Jones.
Mr. President, I move to approve the guaranteed maximum price of $20,094,134 for the scope of work contained within bid package 3 for Comal ISD Middle School 8.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, ma'am. Next is one of our rock stars after Mrs. Catherine Gottlieb coming up with consideration and possible approval of concessionaire services, RFP 23-01.
All right, we're gonna kickstart this. My nominations for the school's gonna be Motley Crue. Sorry, we digress. All right, this item is for concessionaire services. I'm a little bit sad that Mr. Custode isn't here to hear me talk about this, because I know this was something near and dear to his heart. We had talked about it previously, and then COVID happened, which was a real bear on our concessionaires who weren't really selling a whole lot and are having to individually package things, and so we had a little grace there, so we finally went back out for an RFP. You know, board policy and the education code requires that you issue an RFP for items that the school district is gonna spend more than $50,000 on. In this particular case, we're not spending any money, so to speak, it's a revenue generator for us. However, it's just good practice to throw an RFP out there, see who's out there, who wants to jump in the game.
Funnel cake, is that only gonna be available at Davenport Piper High School?
Yes, sir. That would be one of those items, so I encourage you to visit all our campuses to.
What happened to quality across the district? That's what I'm wondering. I'm gonna have to go to Piper or Davenport to get a funnel cake on a Friday night.
Big spender, that's
Somebody wanna make a motion, please?
Mr. President,
Mr. Hughes.
I move to approve the award of concessionaire service contracts at the District's 5 comprehensive high schools as presented.
Motion made and seconded, second time. And all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, next is, this is down to again, consideration and possible approval of architect contract for Hill Country College Prep High School.
Yes, sir. If you'll remember, back on March 31st, the board of trustees approved the selection of LPA as our architect of record on this particular project. So what we do in that, we select the architect based on qualifications, and then we go out and negotiate the contract. So, these professional service contracts that are valued at over $350,000, we bring to the board for approval. So we are coming back with, the value on this contract is $1.81 million. And I know, Mr. Krasinski, you're gonna ask me what the budget was, so I came prepared for you. Getting to know you, Marty. But as Ms. Herman alluded to, that $16 million that will be coming back, obviously this is one of those areas where we first see some savings. So we had originally planned for, $3.2 million for the architect cost, and so it's coming in 1.8, so that difference of 1.3 will be part of that 16 million that we hope to receive for this project. We have gone, we've kind of moved forward with this. Mr. Smith has been very instrumental in making sure that we get these contracts in at a fixed sum, which helps us battle and insulate ourselves against some of that cost escalation. Whereas in prior contracts, we have done a percentage base, so that would kind of be, that would really set us up right now, so at least we can manage this. It comes in at 7.2%, which you might say, oh, we've had contracts lower than that. Yes, we have, but this is a smaller project, so typically what we see, lower cost, higher percentage. It's just the way the thing works. So if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Youngman.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Ross.
I move to approve the proposed contract from RPA Incorporated to provide architectural services at Hill Country College Preparatory High School as presented.
Motion made, second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Next is consideration of possible approval of architect contract for Will Brown Elementary School, Rebecca Creek Elementary School, and Mount Valley Middle School renovation. John.
Thank you very much. So again, this is very similar to the last one, although we haven't done a selection on this. We do within our professional, service provider pool that the board approved back in November, we looked at our architects, we were trying to spread those smaller projects out amongst, a number of different architects. On this particular contract, they lumped in 3 different projects, so a lot of times you'll see where I do a contract ratification, so like for Bill Brown, I would have given $20,987. LPA actually grouped these 3 projects together into one contract, with a fixed fee that's broken out as I explained in the memo there. But ultimately, as you can see, the bulk of this one, that you see, $350,000 is Mountain Valley Middle School. So again, I'm gonna tell you that for Mountain Valley Middle School, we can budgeted $636,000 for architect costs, so we're happy with where this came in. So if you've got any questions about that, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Youngman.
Mr. President.
Mr. Krasinski.
I move to approve the ranking of firms submitted by administration. In addition, I authorize district staff to enter negotiations according to approved rankings and execute any documents necessary and advise or finalize any subsequent agreements related to RFQ 22 dash, oh, are they wrong? Gosh.
Page 28.
I'm sorry.
But if you wanna go ahead with that
I
one.
may have, sorry.
You're good.
I move to approve the proposed contract for LPA to provide architectural services as presented.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. And now we are ready for consideration and possible approval of RFQ 22-09 contract ranking for CM at-risk playground. Ms. Young.
All right, so I've talked to you guys about playground an awful lot.
Yonda? Mr. Hennessy?
Ms. Yonda, I'm sorry if you did say it, but where will those playgrounds be stored? The company will hold them for us, or will they?
Yes, so then that becomes the contractors, which has been a little bit of a challenge for us because we have 4 sets of large playground equipment stored right here, right now. So, we'll be looking forward to getting those out to the sites. And then they will be responsible for purchasing them. It will be within their contract, the other 9.
Thank you. Mr. President,
Mr. Hennessy?
I move to approve the ranking of firms submitted by administration, and in addition, authorize district staff to enter into negotiations according to approved rankings and execute any documents necessary and advisable to finalize any subsequent agreement related to RFQ 2209.
Second.
Motion made second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we are now at network equipment for elementary school 19 and elementary school 20. Mrs. Young.
Last another thing. So this, we're trying to get this equipment on order so that it will be here in plenty of time for next summer. I think I can talk to you about like a neon shortage or something like that, if that's really happening. So, we are applying for this under the E-rate federal funding program. So right now, we included an allowance within the construction contract for the networking equipment, but, the contractors aren't eligible to apply for that E-rate funding. So we do that. So what we're trying to do is to purchase that and put this category 2. You're familiar with any of the E-rate stuff, they have category 1, and they try to fund all the applicants for category 1 with whatever amount of money that they have set aside for the E-rate program. If they can satisfy all of the category 1 requests, they will move on to category 2. So we're not guaranteed that we're going to get additional funding from the federal government on this, but we're certainly going to apply and hope that we do. We have the funding to be able to purchase this, but any little bit is going to help and ultimately add to that bottom line on Christmas line. So, we received in 5 proposals, and we are recommending the lowest cost proposal, which I think Network Solutions will be the end of this. So if you have any questions, I'll be able to answer.
Mrs. Young and Mrs. Biasotti?
Thank you, Mr. President. So how do you, how are you in category 1 versus 2? Is it by what you're?
Yeah, so the E-rate program, which is a federal program run by the Universal Schools and Libraries Corporation. What they do is they decide each year through legislation how much money is going to be there, and they put out an eligible services product listing. It changes each year, so, we apply for a lot of things that are wide area network coverage, a lot of our connectivity things that we do, our internet providers and all that. So the network equipment isn't considered in category 1 for this particular funding year, it's category 2. But we will typically see some funding, I'm hopeful that we'll get some of it, and we usually, we run about a 60%, return on that. You know, it's based off of the free and reduced lunch eligibility, so the higher free and reduced lunch you have, the higher the funding. And so what happens is districts or applicants, because public libraries can apply for this too. If they have a higher percentage, they start with those and work their way down. So we're kind of a little bit more middle of the pack. So we have to get through all the category 1. So anything we will submit in category 1 will typically be funded. And then if there's money left after category 1, they move into all the category 2 requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Biasotti.
Mr. President, I move to approve the purchase of network equipment for elementary schools 19 and 20 from NetSync Network Solutions as presented.
Second.
Motion made second, all in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Young, for that amazing rock concert you just presented to us. The Board of Trustees on August 22nd, 2022, beginning at 8:23 p.m. will convene in closed session pursuant to section 551.071 through 551.0821 of the Texas Government Code to discuss agenda items 8A through E. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. Be safe going home. I know it's raining and potential storms out there. And again, those of you that do not need or must stay, please go home and be ready for the first day of school tomorrow morning. Thank you. Sorry, yes.